Oi, what's going on, everybody? We got Smooth Jimmy on the screen. I'm ready. I guess that means it's time for another Balls Deep breakdown here with me, your host, Uncle Weezy. Today, we are going to get into a UFC Vegas 31 matchup between a couple of studs here. I can't wait to get into this fight. We're going to talk about Jeremy Stephens against Mateusz Gamrot. And we have got a very interesting matchup here. We've got one of the most credentialed veterans fighting in the UFC today in Jeremy Stephens, who's got 47 professional fights and 33 of them being in the UFC. And then we got a kind of a UFC newcomer here with only his third UFC fight, a man who is almost undefeated. His only loss coming by split decision in his UFC debut to Garam Kudateladze. So we got Gamrot, we got Stephens, we got a balls deep breakdown. Smooth Jimmy's ready. I'm ready. I know you guys that are waiting with me here are ready. So let's start like we always do with the tail of the tape. But you know what? Let's not. Let's first say what's up to the people that are in the room with us here. We got Asphalt in here. Let's go. Let's go. Let's talk about this matchup. We got my man DFS by the numbers. He already went live today on Pub Sports Radio earlier to talk a little DraftKings for this UFC Vegas 31 card. What's up, Big Brady? Thanks for rolling with me here today. And we got Asphalt's telling us that he's got Gamrot in this one. I will let you know who I have after we break down all these beautiful numbers that I have in front of me. But this is going to be a hell of a fight, man. And I am really looking forward to it. So now that we've said what's up to everybody in the room, thank you all for hanging out. Let's get into these numbers. Let's get into the tail of the tape. The dog is already barking. Woo. All right. So Jeremy Stephens is 35 years old, and Mateusz Gamrot is 30. We've got a 1-inch height advantage for Gamrot and a 1-inch reach advantage for Stephens. Gamrot is a southpaw fighter, and Stephens is an orthodox fighter. We got Jeremy Stephens training out of Alliance MMA, and we have got Mateusz Gamrot, who does most of his training at ATT. He's also at Sorny Spak when he is in Poland. And obviously, Gamrot is from Poland and United States for Jeremy Stephens. So as I mentioned earlier, when we get into the pro experience here, we got 47 professional fights for Jeremy Stephens and 20 for Gamrot, a 28-18 record with one no contest for Stephens, 18-1-1 for Gamrot. There was a no contest on his end as well. When we look at the cage time, you know, Gamrot's a veteran here. We got 231 minutes in the professional cage for Gamrot. So he's 30 years old, right in the sweet spot of his career. He's got plenty of experience outside of the UFC. He was a champion in KSW before coming to the UFC. But even with all that experience, we still got almost twice as much time in the cage for Jeremy Stephens over his 47 fight career. 453 minutes of cage time. I don't think you're going to find maybe Frankie Edgar's got more cage time than that right now that's still active in the UFC. Jeremy Stephens has really got, I'll have to look in my database one of these days to see who's got more minutes in this cage, especially in the UFC cage, than Jeremy Stephens at this point. With 33 UFC fights, Donald Cerrone maybe might be up there, maybe Arlovsky, but man, he is an absolute veteran. And we see that Gamrot's been doing this for 9.5 years, while for Jeremy Stephens, 16.5 years as a professional mixed martial artist. So it looks like he started about the age of 18, and it's probably about the age of 20 or 21 for Mateusz Gamrot. So where we do see the big experience difference here is in the amount of UFC experience. So Jeremy Stephens, 33 UFC fights to only 2 for Gamrot. So we've got a 15-17-1 no contest record for Jeremy Stephens. So he's lost more fights than he's won in the UFC. And Gamrot's a 500 fighter, lost to Kudateladze, a win over Holtzman. And then we've got 388 minutes in the UFC cage for Jeremy Stephens, a lifetime, really, and 21 minutes for Gamrot. So 10.68 minutes is the average fight time for Gamrot, 11.77 for Stephens. So, yeah, Jeremy Stephens, a ton of experience, absolutely a ton. Maybe too much tread on those tires after fighting at the highest level for this amount of time. But Gamrot also, very experienced here. But we see that, Jeremy Stephens has 47 fights, 33 of them in the UFC. So definitely, much higher percentage of Jeremy Stephens' career. He's been fighting at the highest level, but we can't take anything away from Gamrot either, being a champion in KSW, and I believe he defended his belt several times, maybe 4 or 5 times. So not only does Gamrot have championship level fight experience in KSW, but he's went 5 rounds a couple of times. He's got a 4th round finish in a championship fight. So even though Stephens has been fighting at the highest level, Gamrot has been fighting at the highest level of the regional scene. He's been a champion, and he knows how to go 5 rounds. So he knows what it's like to be in marquee fights. He knows what it's like to be the name at the top of the marquee, the one that everybody's out there to see. And he's done very well for himself thus far in the UFC, and has shown that his regional scene experience as a champion is translating at this level. Let's go back here into the chat here. We got my guy Mystic Sosa in the room. What's going on? Let's see if Gamrot can win another bout after that Guram loss. Now, for those of you who don't know, Mystic Sosa predicted the Guram Kutateladze victory over Mateusz Gamrot, and he has not let anybody forget the fact that he has predicted that fight. And still to this day, all this time later, we will hear about Mystic Sosa correctly predicting that fight. Mystic Mac, Mystic Sosa, the man gets it right very, very often. Thanks for coming in, Sosa. Appreciate it. We got Chris, my guy for the Love MMA, one of my favorite people, one of my favorite supporters, always shouting me out on Twitter, always commenting on my videos. Chris, what's up? Thanks for hanging out. He says he's always late, man. My parents always used to say that about me. Weezy is always on the grind, man. I'm on the grind, trying to give you guys as many stats, as many angles as possible for these fights coming up on Saturday. There's some interesting ones. This is definitely one of the best. And another huge supporter of me here, Dan Goldstein, Uncle Weezy, coming in hotter than Derek Lewis balls in the summertime, man. His balls get hot. His balls get hot. And he's in Houston too, man. It gets hot down there. So thanks for showing up, Dan. Appreciate you hanging out with us here. Sosa, sounds like Drickus to me, double champ, man. He got that one right too. Sosa was on Drickus. I was on Trevin Giles. He got that one right. I got that one wrong. He got Kutateladze right. I got Gamrot wrong. My God. And then we got Mystic Sosa's best buddy in the room, PayPal My Money DFS. These guys are really good friends. And he at Uncle Weezy, post my comment, LOL. Screw at Mystic Sosa. Now this is all just gentle, loving back and forth between these two. Sosa and PayPal really do love each other. We got Chris showing up, laughing my ass off. Chris, Dan, let's go. Let's go, you guys. Now we're really getting into it, man. I love it. We are interacting with your Uncle Weezy here. We got a little back and forth in the chat. Let's get into these finish numbers here. We got, hang on a second. Let me get this one off the screen so we can get Sosa shit talking up after we get back here to the finish numbers for Gamrot and Stephens. So one thing that we do know if we've watched Jeremy Stephens over his illustrious UFC career is that this dude has got crazy power, and it shows in these finish stats, as we see that he's finished 68% of his professional wins, and there are 28 of them by knockout and 7% by sub for a 75% finish rate. So he's finished 21 of those 28 victories of his, and 53% of his 15 wins in the UFC have come by knockout. So he's never subbed anybody in the UFC. He knocks people out. He hits hard. He is the hardest hitting 145er, but this fight is taking place at 155. And we got from Mateusz Gamrot, his one win in the UFC came by knockout, and his wins in his career have come 33% by knockout of his 18 wins. So 6 wins by knockout and 4 wins by submission for Mateusz Gamrot, which means 8 wins by decision. So Gamrot, not an illustrious finisher. He is a dude who takes his time. He wrestles. He uses his grappling and his boxing, and he is very hard to beat. And he has only got 1 loss on that record in 20 fights for a reason. So Gamrot has never been finished. As far as Stephens, he's got 18 career losses, 17% by knockout, 17% by submission. So only 33% really of his losses have come inside the distance. So 12 of his losses are by submission. So especially with, Stevens fighting at the highest level for most of his career, 33 fights in the UFC. He's very tough, and he is very difficult to finish. So let's get into the striking stats here. And let me get these just a little bit right in the center of the screen here. All right, cool. So we've got Jeremy Stevens landing 3.18 out of 7.77 significant strikes per minute for a 41% striking accuracy. And we've got Mateusz Gamrot landing 4.26 significant strikes out of 8.85 offered for a 48.15% striking accuracy. Here we see that crazy power for Jeremy Stevens. We've got a 1.46% knockdown per total significant strikes landed. That is a huge ratio for a featherweight. This guy carries enormous power in his hands and in his legs, because some of those knockdowns came via leg kick against Gilbert Melendez. So not only does Jeremy Stevens hit hard with his hands, but he's got vicious leg kicks too. And a lot of those power numbers are because of those leg kick knockdowns that he got against Gilbert Melendez. So he is averaging 0.7 knockdowns per 15 minutes. But we see that over the 2-fight sample size for Mateusz Gamrot, we also have an over 1% knockdown per total significant strikes landed here. And he's averaging actually the same amount of knockdowns for 15 minutes. But, let's just remember that Mateusz Gamrot has 1 knockdown in his UFC career, while for Jeremy Stevens, it's 18. That is 18 knockdowns. That 1.46% knockdowns per total significant strikes landed is 18 knockdowns landed in 1,234 significant strikes. That is huge. We know this dude has power. The numbers actually really shake that out as well. So Jeremy Stevens, tremendous power. And one thing that I wanted to show you guys here in the advanced stats that I do for DFS by the Numbers Patreon, which is only $10 a month. It's ridiculous. If you do DFS, if you're a bettor, you should be on that Patreon for $10 a month. It has some of the best information that there is out there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight every fight, and there are a lot of them, where Jeremy Stevens has had a knockdown. And we're going to look at his record in those fights, just to let you know how important Jeremy Stevens' power is to the outcome of his fights. So this is a lot of work, you guys. You see how many knockdowns this guy has had in the UFC. He knocked down Cole Miller, Rafael Dos Anjos, Justin Buchholz, Sam Stout, Gillard Davis, Jason Bermudez, Edgar Melendez, Duho Choi, and Josh Emmett. Now, in his 18 knockdowns, he's gotten knockdowns in 12 different fights. And we can count up the wins and losses here. And we'll see that when Jeremy Stevens gets a knockdown, he is 10-2. 10-2. So 12 fights he's had a knockdown. He's winning 83.3% of them when he gets a knockdown. So that is a very big stat here. We see W, 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 W. See that? There are 10 total of them. And he is 10-2. We got the last 2 down here. So the only times he got a knockdown and didn't win was against Melvin Gillard and against Frankie Edgar, the champ. So this guy shows a lot of power. Now, if we do the process of elimination, we know that this guy is 15-17 in the UFC. So 32 fights where he's either won and lost. Now, we've got a 10-2 record when he is getting knockdowns. If we do the process of elimination, we know that he's 5-15 when he doesn't get a knockdown. So Jeremy Stevens really relying on that power. An 83.3% winning percentage when he does get a knockout, and a 25% winning percentage when he doesn't get a knockdown. So these are huge numbers. Jeremy Stevens relies on his power, and I had to make that point for you guys before we got to the grappling stats here. And so now let's look at the grappling stats for these two gentlemen. And first, let's see what's up here in the chat, because those are some interesting numbers. I want to see what you guys have to say about that. All right. And we got Sosa up here. Telling PayPal to go do some Bellator tapes, you bastard. Yeah, dude, these guys love their Bellator, man, and they have a nice little Bellator rivalry going here. We got Chris. The only way to bet Jeremy is by TKO, in my opinion, and I don't feel good, even with great value, most likely on that. I'll just enjoy the fight. Yeah, man. I mean, we just talked about those power numbers for Stevens, dude. The guy relies on his power, so if you're gonna bet him, you're probably thinking that he probably gets this done inside the distance by knockout, because if Gamrot gets his way with his wrestling, it probably does go the distance. And K. Robbie's saying Stevens is coming for his head. Man, Stevens comes for everybody's head. That dude is a savage. He hits so hard. And yeah, DFS by the numbers saying, curious to see what the Stevens knockout prop is. I had my FanDuel account up so we could look into the odds here, but they don't have any props up yet. So we'll look and see what the props are after we're done looking through all the numbers here, to see if we can find some angles on what props are available here on best fight odds. And Dan Goldstein, I am nervous of Jeremy's power, but I get slight comfort as a Gamrot backer that the power might decline going up. And yeah, that's a big point here. This is the first fight in 155 pounds for Jeremy Stevens in a while. And we'll get back into that when we look at the advanced stats here, because that's a very important point. Jeremy Stevens hasn't fought at 155, I think, for 7 or 8 years, but we'll definitely look at that. That's a great point, Dan, and we're going to bring that up. Mystic Sosa, once again, damn, Gamrot better grab one of those kicks and wrestle this man. You're damn right he better. And we'll get into the grappling stats here and see that there's probably a really good opportunity to bet Gamrot here, because he knows who he is. He's not trying to knock this guy out, I don't think. I think he knows he got a little bit lucky against Holtzman. Now he's got to go back to that wrestling. At DFS by the numbers, not a good look for Gamrot getting knocked down by that Georgian loser. Oh, it's great. Thanks, PayPal. Aldo Estrada, my guy. What's up, Aldo? Thanks for hanging out, man. Gamrot can get control time grappling easy. Yeah, and he's already done it in the UFC, and he's definitely done it pre-UFC in KSW. Have some respect. That overhand was vicious, and it was. Yeah, he did. He knocked him down right at the beginning of the second round. I think Kuta Galate knocked down Gamrot. That was the one that is the knockdown against. And shit, we haven't even gotten into the defensive striking numbers here. My God, you guys are killing it in the chat. Thanks for hanging out, everybody. So the defensive striking numbers here. Let me get this down so you guys can see these numbers here, because these are important. 3.06 strikes absorbed for Stevens, so he is landing more than he's absorbing. He's also throwing more than his opponents are at 3.0 or at 7.3 as opposed to 7.77. 58% striking defense, very good over the sample size that Stevens has shown in the UFC here. 58% is a really good striking defense. Not what you would call chinny, less than 0.5% he's getting knocked down. And I mean, this guy's absorbed almost 1,200 strikes in the UFC, so he is not getting knocked down. He's probably, I think that'll probably, if I'm doing the math right in my head, that's probably 5 total knockdowns against. And I mean, he has 18. So yeah, not what I would call chinny, and only 0.2 knockdowns allowed per 15 minutes. Well, Gamrot is landing 4.26 strikes and only absorbing 2.2. So that's a, over 2 significant strike difference, and almost 2-to-1 ratio that he's outlanding his opponents at. So very, very impressive. And he's out-voluming his opponents, as he's throwing 8.85 significant strike attempts, and his opponents are only throwing 6.27. Exemplary striking defense at 65% for Gamrot. That bum Kutatelase knocked him down. So that's where we have the 1 knockdown and 47 strikes absorbed. So that's 2%, but it's a very small sample size. But, if you're on the Stevens side and you know that this guy's only had 2 fights in the UFC, Gamrot, and he's been knocked down in one of them, that's something to hang your hat on if you are on the Stevens side. So he's averaging 0.7 knockdowns here per 15 minutes. Let me get back here to the chat. And will Stevens' power translate to the higher weight class? Well, you know what? Let's look at that, Headley One. I'm glad you brought that up. Let me get that comment off the page, though, just so I can show you guys what kind of power numbers my man showed when he was fighting at 155 pounds. So we can see the weight class in this row right here. You see that? And we see that he's been fighting at 145 since 2013. So the last fight at 155 was Yves Edwards back in 2012, and then Donald Cerrone before that, Pettis before that. So we've got a pretty good sample size here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 fights at 155 pounds. And we've got 1 knockdown, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 7 of his 18 knockdowns came at 155 pounds, and almost half of his fights were there. So that's almost half the knockdowns, almost half the fights. So yeah, I think the power will translate. And they do say, Stephens is getting older. He's old for a lightweight or a featherweight at 35 years old. However, the power, they say, is the last thing to go. So, we're going to have to, if you're on the Gamrot side, you got to really hope that he does wrestle and wrestle often, because if he doesn't, he's going to be on the feet with Jeremy Stephens and dealing with that power. And we know how mean this dude is. We know how vicious his leg kicks are, and we know what kind of power he has in his hands. So Gamrot, if you want a comfortable win out of Gamrot, if you want him to look what his odds are right now, which is around minus 230, we'll look at that at the end. You better damn well hope he wrestles. So let's get into these comments here first. DFS by the number saying he thought he'd be parlaying Gamrot, but because of that power, Stephens gives him serious pause. And yeah, it does me too, man. But once we get into the grappling numbers, maybe we can kind of find some comfort in those grappling numbers in the small sample size for Gamrot if we hope that this guy winds up going to his wrestling. Aldo Estrada 0, you just doxed yourself. Yeah, we all know who he is, PayPal. He's our guy, Chris. He truly is a beast. I love Jeremy, but I don't think the weight jump is going to help enough here, as you mentioned, that grappling. Yeah, and when you come up a weight class, you're getting grappled by bigger guys. So that's a great point, Chris. Thank you. PayPal my money. At Mystic Sosa, LOL, Garam might be a Dagestani with the way he pulls out of fights. Yikes. Boy, score 1 for PayPal there. Laughing my ass off. I agree, PayPal. Talking shit. We got Brian in the chat. I rewatched that Kuta Latte knockdown. Not a legit knockdown in my book. It was more of an off-balance thing. Yeah, it was right at the beginning of the round, but I mean, he might have been a bit off balance, but it looked like a very clean shot that caught him. Oftentimes the ones that knock you down are the ones that you don't see, or the ones that you don't expect. So maybe it was a little bit of both there, Brian. Thanks for hanging out. Georgian at Brian, the Georgian losers groupie will attack you for saying that. And then that punch hit him so hard reminded me of Gilbert versus Usman, only that Usman managed to stay up with one hand and not consider it a knockdown. It was very smart of the second. It was the very start of the second round, so I guess Gamrot wasn't expecting it. It was right there at the beginning of the second round. Dan Goldstein, Jeremy Stephens is 35 or 36, if I'm correct. I mean, that's young in tree years, but at feather and lightweight, not so much. But the power translation is scary. Yeah, the power will translate. I believe that it will, just the way that this dude hits. But let's get into these grappling numbers here, because this is important. Jeremy Stephens, 38.46 takedown percentage. He's attempted 78 takedowns in his 33 fights. So, he's a little less than 2.5 takedowns, takedown attempts per fight, about less than 1 takedown per fight. He's averaging 1.16 takedowns per 15 minutes. But this is the key stat here. Mateusz Gamrot has 7 takedowns in 2 fights, but he has 21 takedown attempts in 2 fights. So when you're picking somebody in Gamrot who is a favorite right now, he's a better than a minus 200 favorite at this point. So, you want to see him use that wrestling. And one of the most comforting things that you can see is somebody who is averaging double-digit takedowns per fight, especially against a guy like Stephens, because Stephens' takedown defense is not spectacular either. His takedown defense is 65.77%. It's not horrible. It's not spectacular. But, we can see 111 takedown attempts against Jeremy Stephens in his 33 fights. So his opponents are averaging more than three takedown attempts per fight against Jeremy. They know he's powerful. If they have wrestling in their back pocket, Jeremy Stephens is exactly the kind of guy that you better use it against. Otherwise, you could wind up looking at the lights, wondering what the fuck happened. So, Jeremy Stephens is used to fairly heavy wrestling game plans, but I don't know if he's really used to getting 10 and a half takedown attempts per fight against. This is about 3 here that we're seeing, maybe 3.5. But Jeremy Stephens is being taken down about 1.5 times for 15 minutes. His opponents are attempting about a submission attempt for 15 minutes. And if we look at the control time numbers here, we see that Jeremy Stephens is being out-controlled by his opponents by about 2%. And then about almost 40% of Jeremy Stephens' fights are taking place in control time positions. Mateusz Gamrot is controlling his opponents 20% of the time, but only being controlled 0.8% of the time. So this guy's got 100% takedown defense too. So definitely a very good indication that he's going to be able to control Stephens for some of the fight, but I'd like to see that control time for this fight be up around 50 or 60% if I'm going to be happy, or if I'm going to think that Gamrot's going to have a really good chance to win this, because every minute that Jeremy Stephens has canvas underneath his feet and he's throwing those hands and throwing those leg kicks, man, he's going to be incredibly dangerous. But we are seeing the kind of numbers that we want to see out of a grappler, very heavy takedown attack here, 10.5 per fight. Those are the kind of numbers that you want to see if you're going to lay that minus 230 on Mateusz Gamrot here. Let's look at the strength of schedule metrics that I compute here in my spreadsheets. We have got the ratios of wins to losses of Gamrot and Stephens' opponents over their UFC careers here. We see that in the 33 fight sample size that we have for Jeremy Stephens, he's fighting very tough opponents. The average record of his opponent is 9-6. So 15 total fights, a 1.5 win to loss ratio. While for Gamrot, it's a 3.5-2 record. He's got 5.5 total fights in his opponent's records and a 1.75 ratio, but it's a much, much smaller sample size. Jeremy Stephens has obviously fought the tougher brand of competition here, but most of it was at 145 pounds. If we look at their wins, Gamrot's only got 1 win. It's against Scott Holtzman. We've got Stephens here. He's got 15 wins, and over his 15 wins, the average record of his opponent is 6.67 and 4.87, 11.53 total fights for a 1.37 ratio. So Jeremy Stephens is beating good competition, and he's losing to even better competition, as the average record of the guy that beats Jeremy Stephens has 11 UFC wins and 7 UFC losses, 18 UFC fights. So this guy, when he loses to people, he's losing to the top guys that are in the division, whether it's 145 or earlier in his career at 155. And let's look at this. Let's look at some of these records that he's lost to. This guy made his debut back in 2007 against Dean Thomas. And what's hilarious about this is that fight took place on May 26th, 2007 against Dean Thomas. Let's look at his birthday, May 25th, 1986. So this guy was born May 25th. He's fighting May 26th, 2007. Dude, he was 21 years old, man. It's crazy. This guy debuted in the UFC at 21, and he had Dean Thomas. He lost to Spencer Fisher. Prayers going out to Spencer Fisher. I know he's having a real tough time dealing with some of the trauma from his fighting days. I wish him the best. Lost to Joe Lozon. Lost to Gleison Tebow. Lost to Melvin Gillard. Anthony Pettis, former champion. Donald Cerrone, former title contender. Yves Edwards, and this is all at 155. And then at 145, he's losing to Cub Swanson. Current champion at 155, Charles Oliveira. Current 145-pound, or well, he should be, but let's just say he'll be fighting for that championship again, hopefully sometime soon. Max Holloway, former champion, 18-6. Frankie Edgar, former champion. Inato Moicano, world champion grappler. Jose Aldo, former champion. Undefeated Zabit Magomed Shapirov. Yair Rodriguez, 8-1 in the UFC. Calvin Kattar, 6-3. And he's beaten guys like Josh Emmett, Duho Choi, Gilbert Melendez, former champion Renan Barao, Dennis Bermudez. What a fight that was. Darren Elkins, Hani Jason, Esteban Payan. These are, he's been through a who's who of the featherweight and lightweight divisions. This guy has fought everybody. If you add up the record of his last 4 losses, the combined record of those 4 opponents, Kattar, Yair Rodriguez, Magomed Shapirov, and Aldo, is 17-25, 31-10, a 3.1 win-to-loss ratio of those opponents. So yeah, he's definitely fighting the highest level of competition. But one thing I also wanted to bring up, and I've already computed this stat, I'm not going to highlight everything for you guys like I did earlier, but Jeremy Stephens has been taken down in 15 of his 33 UFC fights. So almost half the fights that Jeremy Stephens has fought in the UFC, he's been taken down in. And we know that Mateusz is going to try to take this guy down. In those fights, he's 4 wins and 11 losses. So less than a 1/3 winning percentage for Jeremy Stephens in the fights where he is being taken down. And we know that Mateusz Gamrot is shooting 10.5 takedowns per UFC fight. So the way I'm seeing this taking place is that Gamrot is probably going to shoot a ton of takedowns. And if he doesn't, he's probably going to wind up looking up at the lights wondering what happened in searing pain. But I am going to pick Gamrot to win this fight by decision. Let's see where you guys are looking here in the chat. Let's see. Mystic Sosa saying 21 takedown attempts in 2 fights. God damn. Yeah. So if you're on that Gamrot side, you want him wrestling, and that's very comforting to see. Dan Goldstein, it's the school holidays here, and I have your nieces. Oh boy. Well, have fun with that, Dan. Maybe you can just put them in a room somewhere and let them entertain themselves while you sit here with your Uncle Weezy and talk some fights. PayPal. Yeah, I actually just watched the knockdown. I agree with Brian L. on that. Gamrot had thrown a kick, which was caught and let go as he was punched. Nothing like how Burns clocked Usman. Yeah, I'll have to go back and watch that one too. Nieces. Apparently they're like food, so I got to feed them. I've never even heard of that. I don't think you have to feed kids. I'll watch the rest later. Thanks as always, Uncle Weezy. Dan, thanks for hanging out with us, man. I appreciate it. Brian, agreed. I'm probably 5 units on Gamrot this weekend. Anything could happen, but I think it's more likely he looks like a -500 fight night than looking like a bad pick. Yeah, and Gamrot's got nice boxing in his own right. He's done real well with his hands prior to the UFC. His 3rd fight with Norman Park, you should see his hands look great. But, if he wrestles, he could look -500, especially if he wrestles successfully. Because, Stephens' takedown defense is okay. It's good. It's not fantastic, and it's not bottom of the barrel by any stretch of the imagination. This guy's fought a lot of tough guys. But, I don't know. Depending on what Gamrot's game plan is probably how he's going to wind up looking here. We got Chris here. Stephens isn't a Diego Sanchez, so he's still got plenty left in the tank to be in a war and always be live for a TKO. Hard not to love Stephens as a person, but I think he loses. Yeah, I think he's just fought such tough competition. I mean, Zabit, Aldo, Yair, and Calvin his last 4 fights. All of them amazing strikers too. Think about that. All of those guys are some of the top level, most dynamic strikers. Gamrot is not that. Gamrot is more of a wrestle boxer. So, this is going to be a different type of challenge because Stephens hasn't had anybody really even try to wrestle him since Zabit. And prior to that, it's been a minute, So, yeah, this is going to be an interesting stylistic matchup because this guy hasn't seen anybody that's going to wrestle like Zabit. And the Zabit fight was in 2019, in March of 2019, So it was over 2 years ago. Mystic Sosa, I got Gamrot to TKO or decision. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Gamrot by sub for Aldo. Yeah, I mean, dude, that's another thing. If we look at Gamrot's experience here, we can see that he's got a grappling loss against Gary Tonin. This guy is competing at the 2019 ADCC World Championships. So he's grappling outside of the UFC at the very highest level. So this guy Gamrot is no joke, dude. He's got wins by heel hook. He's got wins by rear naked choke. He can submit you. He can knock you out, or he could, grind you out to a decision. And he has done all three very well in his career. Brian saying that he thinks Gamrot is also live for a sub. I'm going to avoid the method. Yeah, I hear you. I would avoid the method too, because Gamrot can finish you he can beat you with decision. He can beat you via knockout, as we saw in his last fight, and he can beat you, via submission, because he's got heel hooks on his resume too. Dude's a really good grappler. Put them in a room somewhere and let them entertain themselves. Yeah, that's how I would do it, man. I'm not good with kids. I don't have any, though. That's a good thing. DFS by the numbers. Gamrot on DK for me. Lots of takedowns upcoming. And yeah, dude, if you liked Max Griffin last week, this is a very similar stylistic matchup in that, not that Condit has the kind of power that Stevens has, but it's just that, if you're betting Griffin or if you're betting Gamrot, you're kind of hoping the same thing, that this guy's going to go out there and take down their opponent. Now, Griffin didn't do that, but he still wound up getting the win because his striking was much improved. Wow. Let's take a look at these lines, you guys. Let's see what we can find here. So we see that the best you can get on Stevens right now is about plus 195, and Gamrot, you can get him at plus or minus 200 on BetMGM. My books, FanDuel, and DraftKings are minus 230 and minus 250. So kind of wide there. And let's see here. We got Stevens inside the distance is plus 340. So, the Stevens KO prop is probably like plus 350, because the guy's never had a submission in the UFC. So if we're going to go off of what we think the Stevens KO prop might be, because for some reason there's only like 6 props here listed for this fight. I don't know if this one was listed later. Now we're up to 8. Okay, I'm glad I refreshed the page. Maybe we can find the under 2.5 for this fight right now. They're listing at minus 115. So over under is a pick'em. And that sounds about fair to me, because the way that Gamrot wrestles, you would think that this probably does go to decision. But if he's unsuccessful with the wrestling, or if Stevens does show good takedown defense, you could see a knockout happening. Or if the coming up a weight class and grappling somebody as strong of a wrestler and explosive as Gamrot, maybe Stevens gets wound down. Maybe he gets submitted late or something. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. Stevens inside the distance. Plus 365 right now is what they're showing, and Gamrot inside the distance plus 150. So yeah, and then Gamrot by decision plus 225. Really? Wow, this is interesting. This book, 5 Dimes, is basically saying that Gamrot has a better chance to finish Stevens than win by decision, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I think the path to victory for Gamrot is via the wrestling and top control and keeping this fight, against the cage and on the ground. And I don't think, Jeremy Stevens isn't the kind of guy who's getting submitted because he's a shitty grappler. It's not how it is. I mean, the guy's only lost 17% of his UFC losses are by submission, I think. We went over that number already. It's not like Stevens is out here getting submitted, and it's not like Mateusz Gamrot is some knockout artist. Jeremy Stevens, 7% of his career losses by submission. So that's only 1 submission loss in his career. I don't know why these books would think that Gamrot would be a better odds on Gamrot to finish inside the distance. That doesn't make any sense. But yeah, plus 225 Gamrot by decision, man. If you're on Gamrot and you don't want to pay the minus 220, minus 230 on the money line, you might just want to bet him by decision. Plus 225 is a nice look there. That would probably be the way that I'd go. From these lines, what I'm seeing, the best value would probably be Gamrot by decision. That Stevens, and then you could even hedge it just a little bit if you want to do the Gamrot money line and you want to lay that juice at minus 200 to minus 230, wherever it is. Maybe you can hedge that by getting 3.5 to 1 on Stevens inside the distance here, because if Stevens does win, the path to victory seems to be a knockout. Let's see what we got here. And definitely Gamrot on DK. Yeah, it's going to be a great look. I don't agree either. Jeremy's tough, even ground and pound stoppage. I don't see. I mean that. I don't see that either. I mean, it just doesn't. Stevens is not a fish out of water on the mat by any stretch of the imagination, and like we see, he's got about 66% takedown defense. It's not like the guy's just flopping on his back every time somebody tries to take him down. Yeah, he honestly, RJ is saying he honestly thinks it'll be back and forth. RJ, this is going to be, I mean, if Gamrot doesn't keep this fight on the ground, man, every minute that it's on the feet could be, serious trouble for Mateusz Gamrot. Yeah, for me, I'm picking Mateusz Gamrot. I'm going to pick him by decision. This has been so much fun. Thank you guys. The chat was just absolutely popping in here tonight. Thank all you guys for hanging out with me here. You can catch me right here on YouTube. If you found this video useful, please like, please subscribe. You can find me on Twitter. You can hit me up there at MMA Weezy. I am also doing main event breakdowns every week with my man DFS by the Numbers on his YouTube channel. And DFS by the Numbers and I are live every Sunday night on Pub Sports Radio, 6:15 Central Time, 7:15 Eastern for Stat Diggers. We go balls deep into all the stats for the upcoming matchup. We did it this couple days ago. Had a great time with all you guys. Thanks you all for hanging out. I love doing these live streams with you guys and hanging out with you. The next one that I'm going to do is going to be Khalid Taha versus Sergey Morozov. I want to look into that tape on Morozov because I think it's one of the more intriguing dog spots on the card. We already went through the Billy Quarantillo, Gabriel Benitez in my last Balls Deep breakdown, which is another interesting dog spot. So I'm trying to find the dog spots on this card that are kind of live and interesting, and then go balls deep into the stats and see if we can find some angles, find some ways to make some money. I'm going to sign off. Thank you all for hanging out with me today, and stay tuned for the next edition of Balls Deep Breakdown with your Uncle Weezy. God bless all you guys. Thank you so much.